Hi everyone, we're back. As you might have guessed, today again we are going to talk about messers or knives.
Yeah, so last time we just basically showed you what we think good fencing looks like, and today we want to use the opportunity to talk about more what that does to a blade, and also show you what that does to a blade if the camera allows. We'll see.
So let's not waste any time and dive right in. So the new Gottfrieds we haven't used as much as we might have wanted, because we wanted to save them for the project and to show you the effects on what we're doing in the projects with them. But luckily we have about 600 other messers here, which we have owned for a long time, which we have used for a long time and for a multitude of purposes. So we have stuff to compare them to.
What we do have, for example, is the Karl. We got that with the Gottfrieds at the same time, but we haven't reserved them for this project, so we've used them more freely. We've used them against other manufacturers' messers, we've used them for harder usage, just for demonstrations, and generally more free fencing, just basically because we didn't save them. And they give a nice impression of what more usage does.
They are a bit different in the blade structure and the blade design. They have a bit of a thicker edge, I'd say, than the thin Gottfrieds at least, but still it's enough of a blade that you can compare just the general wear and tear to it.
Yeah, it's also Landsknechts, of course. I mean, all of these are really. And another thing we have that we also talked about in the past is, of course, our old Gottfrieds from 2016. Both of these have been refurbished. They are used a lot, and we've used them for all purposes, really. Just general fencing, a whole bunch, but also hard techniques, where it's like really blade on blade, like Glasgow play number 5 and 7, for example. So they also give a good impression of what more fencing does, that we generally consider nice or good, but you know, things always happen. So sometimes you do have hard contact, and that shows in this blade here.
That's what I was just looking at. If we take a look at the blades, the 4 blades we received for looking into, after the amount of fencing we did, we see about as much of wear and tear to the blades as we would have expected. It's a little bit hard to show in detail on the camera. That's why we won't even bother here to get closer. We will throw in a flyby.
And the pattern is basically the same for all 4 blades. They show them a bit differently because they have a different geometry, of course. We've got 2 thins and 2 thicks, but the general theme, I would say, is the same. And it matches what we see on the Karls, and it matches what we see on our old Gottfrieds. And that basically is that we see the deepest cuts and nicks really to cross and nagel. And there's also a good amount of wear and tear on the woods.
Yes, really. The wood, or especially the, like my old new hilt has like this brass, hollow brass pommel, which is a little bit, well, distorted by now. And as Peter has mentioned before, both of our Gottfrieds, so the blades are basically the original parts from 2016, but the whole hilt construction has been refurbished at least once.
Yeah, and that is really, I mean, that makes sense, because when you fence with the bind in mind, rhyme not intended, then that is where a lot of contact just happens. With the nagel, when you defend a lot actively with the nagel, that's of course where just a lot of stuff happens. And with the grip, it's just the part where your hand isn't, for better or worse, can get in the way, really. What I always find the most interesting is how it shows on the blade, because the wear pattern is different on each side, really.
When you compare the inside flat to the outside flat, that is, yes.
Yeah, exactly. That is unfortunately something that is really hard to show on camera, but what you can see other than the nicks that you have from just contact and sometimes deeper nicks from harder contact, is just layers and layers of scratches, really. It's really visible by eye, but it's hard to impossible to really to catch on camera. It's been a frustration of mine for quite a while, really just trying to film that.
So if you own a messer by yourself, just take it in your hand, take a look at the outside of the blade and take a look at the inside of the blade, like the flats. Probably you will notice a difference, which makes sense because when you are in these positions like this or these positions, you mostly have the contact with all the winding stuff on your outside of the blade.
Yeah, that's where your nagel is, that's where your defense is, right? But I find it interesting really that it is just something that once you've noticed it, you can kind of see it on all the pieces you have, at least if you're fencing with binding, I'd say. Other than that, you see it less on the Karl, of course, because that is just a thicker blade, but nicks to front and back, they are there. But unless you've done something that has really hard edge-on-edge contact that you can't avoid, like Glasgow number 5 or 7, like those are just the easiest examples because that is just by design, then you won't necessarily get the really deep nicks. Can happen, sometimes you can't avoid it, but mostly you get like an even wear down, I'd say.
So however, we also see nicks on the new blades, just not as far as extensive as on the old ones that have been used over the years in a wide amount of different occasions. We do, however, see some kind of nicks of the blades that we got. They are not quite as extensive, quite as bad, quite as huge, but you do see the use of the edges.
Yeah, and that's just for a part that is mostly just a play on time. In the end, you try to not focus on edge contact, at least how we understand it, but it happens, of course. And sometimes, again, Glasgow 7 or 5, you have techniques that just play on that and make it absolutely unavoidable. To a degree, the nicks we have actually look worse on the newer blades, just because there's not so many, so the ones you do have kind of stand out more compared to the old Gottfried. There's just all over the blade, really.
So from our experience, and that's basically what we hoped to show you here, it's in fact the same amount of damage or the kind of damage to the blades that we were expecting. So no surprises there.
Yeah, but I would say the tendency really is the same. The wear pattern is the same.
Absolutely.
Some differences, of course, because of geometry. You see it more and quicker in the thin edges. And there's a higher chance of, if you get one of those contacts that are not nice, then that will show quicker and more of it. But what we basically see is you do get nicks on the edges, but the really deep ones are rare and mostly a result of either techniques that really focus on edge contact or are a bit of, yeah, just shit happens. And other than that, if you fence in this way as an outlook, I would say a number of things can happen, and from experience have happened, just with our Gottfrieds really. And that is the blade, unless something goes wrong, and that just can happen, will mostly be fine. You will by chance get deeper nicks on the edge, and you should take care of those. Those just need to be filed out, really. That's just general blade maintenance. And that is just something that you can see then. It will be scratches more on the outside than on the inside, and layers and layers and layers of them over longer use, but they're quite shallow. That is mostly cosmetic, I would say. What you will probably get also, and that is something again that you will need to take care of at some point, is the cross will get a good amount of cuts, and yeah, like a rattlesnake, which I like to call mine. Because that's what you defend with actively, or where just the blade slides down, or where you slide into the blade of your opponent because you want to push through and thrust. So you will get a good amount of deep nicks there. Those need to be taken care of. The nagel, especially if you use it actively, will also get a good amount of damage. That again will need to be taken care of. You might want to
It can get loose. Yeah.
It can get quite loose. And there's always a point where you might think about either try refitting it, if you can do that, or have someone give you a new one.
Also, the thing with the nagel getting loose is probably a thing that's not Landsknecht Emporium exclusive, but exclusive to the way of how these messers are made, because these nagels are properly nageled, so they're going through the cross.
In a way, you should see it as a good thing, because if it can get loose, that means it's probably made. And that's still better than just breaking off because it's a third quillen, which can always happen. And what also will need maintenance is the wood. Just because that has happened on ours,
yes.
like we've replaced it on both our old Gottfrieds, and it's, yeah, you might even actually see it from here already. Just the wood catches a lot of cuts, and at some point it will just be completely screwed up, and you will just need to replace that again. But that is kind of like the wear pattern that we have expected from just the messes that we have and that we used, and it fits what we start seeing with the Landsknecht's new Gottfrieds, even with the time that we have used them, which is like nothing compared to these here, really. But it shows already.
So it's basically just a thing of a combination that we see of cuts or hits against all the shoving and controlling movements while being in the bind, which is natural because both are essential things of fencing, especially with the messer. But I think at some point when you're in the mindset that the close distance actually rewards the bind work, because it punishes work that's not in the bind, because you want to control your opponent's blade first before you can go in and take an attack at them, or you risk a double. So all the bind work comes naturally at a certain point, and which results in this kind of wear and tear that we see here. So with all that in mind, that doesn't mean that from time to time there can happen such things as material failure or manufacturing problems. But in our experience, it's more the exception than the norm.
Yeah, and in the end, what you also have to keep in mind, it's a play on time to a degree. I mean, we love our messers, we all do, especially if it's your first, that always has a special place in your heart, but we have to keep in mind it's a tool, it's a training tool, and every tool has a lifespan in the end. It is basically more of a question of when rather than if, unless you retire your messer and don't use it anymore, which is fair, but if you keep using it, at some point it will happen, and it will not be a manufacturing problem, it will just be use, really. What I would maybe expect is, like, if you don't see that much of the shows of wear and tear that we talked about, and then just one clear break, then yeah, that could be manufacturing. Sometimes just happens. If you see a messer like this, basically, and then there's a break, that can just be, that was just the end of its time, really. Kind of just have to accept that at some point. If you have a blade that is relatively pristine on the sides, but you have a bunch of deep nicks, or mostly deep nicks, and then a break, then we should maybe talk about usage. And that's actually what we want to do next.
Yes, so that will be exciting, and we're looking forward to it, because what we will be trying to do next is not see how much damage in how little time we can cause to the blades, but to see if something changes to the damage on the blade if we change the way we fence.
Yeah, so it will not be a destruction test, but we just want to fence differently. We have a theory on that. We'll see how that goes.
Yes, so thank you for listening to us. Thank you for watching. And we're all looking forward to using these blades again. See you next time.
Cheers.